Now we can slowly come out of the meditation and get ready to listen to the talk, which has as a topic, Buddhism. Is it a religion? Is it not clear enough, Professor? In the back, can you hear me? Okay, they can hear. And in this side also you can hear me? Okay, fine. And those who don't hear me, they may need a hearing aid, I suppose. So the topic of the talk is Buddhism. Is it a religion, a philosophy, or a way of life? There are discussions about this topic, and in different countries, different people have different ideas about what Buddhism is or is not. And therefore, it might be interesting to just look at the different ideas and aspects of what different people think about what Buddhism is. So I think that Buddhism is something of all these three: a religion, a philosophy, and a way of life. But because it is a religion in the sense there is a founder, the Buddha, his followers, those arahats and monks and nuns, lay people, upasaka, upasikas. There are rites and rituals, and temples were built, and the monks and Sangha was staying in those temples. Later on also literature came up, the teachings were, handed down, so it became like an organized religion. But in a way, it is different from other religions. If you look at the meaning of the word religion, it means something in Latin and Italian. It means something like binding together again. To bind something together again. In this sense, it is the soul of the person who is being bound to God again. It's lost and it's found and binded in the religion. Now, that is not what Buddhism is about. We don't, in the first place, believe in an everlasting soul. That is a different kind of topic. Maybe we can talk about that, what anatta really means. But it is definitely different from other religions, which either are monotheistic, one God, like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They're all monotheistic, or multi-theistic, like Hinduism, with 33, 40, or this 330 million gods. Nowadays, with the increase of the population, they have to share, I suppose, one god for every 3 or 4 people. But those days, it probably was one god per person, maybe a kind of arakshaka devata, which we also believe in, quite a lot of people, a kind of personal deity who protects you. And anyway, so this idea that it is a religion, yes, because there's a founder, it has followers, it has different types of followers, the arahats, the different kinds of stages of enlightenment. It has the bhikkhu, bhikkhuni, the upasaka, upasikas, the rites and rituals, like vandana and pujas and things like that. So it has become a real religion in a sense. But the accent is not so much on rituals, but more on practice. Buddhism is a kind of a do-it-yourself religion. nobody to ask, like in most religions, you pray to the God and you want to get something basically from God. And whether he gives it or not, well, that is your fate if you don't get it, I suppose. But in Buddhism, it is you have to get the results of your own actions, cause and effect, the karma and rebirth, karma and its effects, all are done by yourself. And you are the one who creates them. You are the one who reaps the results of your own karma. So in that way, it is very much human oriented, not so much God oriented, which is most other religions. So then, let us say that the teachings of the Buddha, they were preserved actually 3 months after the passing away of the Buddha, in a cave at, where is it, in Rajgir, where the Sangha came together, 500 Arhats supposedly, 499, and Ananda joined the last minute when he had become an Arhat. He also joined. And then they sort of, because Ananda was the storehouse of the Dhamma, he had attended all the talks of the Buddha, almost all. He had fantastic memory, and he could actually repeat those teachings and share it with the others. And from that point, it became sort of organized in different kind of what is called nikayas, like the Diga Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, and Khandaka Nikaya, not our Amarapura Nikaya and those Nikayas. But you see, these monks have by hearted the texts, and they went down orally at first, and later on also there in the form of Ola leaf books. And that became what is called the Tripitaka. So the teachings of the Buddha became organized in the form of the Tripitaka, the Vinaya, Sutta, and the Abhidhamma. So in that sense, also you can say that is quite a religion because of these organized teachings. But again, it is different from most other religions, almost all other religions. The one religion which it came closest to is probably Jainism. Jainism in India from Mahathero had very similar ideas about soul and about karma and rebirth and things like that. But other religions have more different types of ideas.
No,
so necessary, later on we can have a kind of Q&A after the talk to discuss certain things which you might want to ask. Not that I know all the answers to every question, but you can ask anyway. So then, the philosophical part of Buddhism, because now we've seen religion, or was it the philosophy? Well, part of the answer is already there, given, namely that you have the Abhidhamma, the deep psychology and philosophy of Buddhism. That is the higher form of teachings which not everybody can understand, but it was taught by the Buddha. And also later on in what is called Atthakatha, the commentaries, there was a lot of extra texts given to describe what is meant here, what is meant there. So there were later on also not only the original teachings of the Buddha, but also commentaries. And now we are just basically talking about, well, the Theravada teachings in countries like Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, and parts of India and Nepal, and parts of Bangladesh, actually, eastern part of Bangladesh. There are a lot of, mostly, well, not a lot, only 1.7% of the total population, but anyway, they are a lot of Theravada Buddhists. But sometimes we seem to forget that there are a lot of what you call Mahayana Buddhists in the world, probably more Mahayana Buddhists than Theravada Buddhists. So to begin with, even in India itself, Mahayana Buddhism was started. And in those days, before Pakistan split off from India, and before Afghanistan became a separate country, all that area was already Buddhist. And it was spreading west, it was spreading east. For instance, via the sea route, Buddhism spread through Vietnam to China. That's the first time it went to China, around the 1st century. It went through the sea route via the northern part of Vietnam into China. And later on in the 5th century AD, again, Buddhism in another wave went from India across the Himalayas to China via the Silk Route. That would have been including Ladakh and Altai, Himalaya, and places like that. It went into Tibet also. So now Tibet is a separate case. It's not only Mahayana, it is called Vajrayana. So in the older days, we had, for Theravada, people used the term Hinayana. Now, Hina is not a very nice word. It means sort of inferior, the inferior path, as if it is not so good as the Mahayana. So now in international conferences, yesterday and the day before, there was a huge Buddhist conference, including with the Dalai Lama in New Delhi, with about 2,000 monks from all the different traditions, Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana. So that spreading of Buddhism to different countries means it became a major influence on the culture and the people and their beliefs, that spread, well, via places like Tibet, and then you get Mongolia, for instance. You get the northeastern part of Asia, which is now called, what's it called? Buryat, which is the place where Russia used to send its prisoners when it was called differently, the coldest area. But Buryat is also a Buddhist area. And there's another place called Tuva, a very small country, which was sort of wedged in between Russia and China, Tuva. So there's a record which is called Tuva Future. That is it, with music, Tuva Future, about Tuva. And then different countries, including Bhutan, of course, madam. Bhutan, not to forget Bhutan, because that's one of the most pure Buddhist countries of the form of Vajrayana. Now, why Vajrayana and not just Mahayana? That's an interesting question, I suppose, now that we're on this side track. Mahayana actually means the great vehicle as compared to the small vehicle like Theravada. And why is it called great vehicle or Mahayana? Because they believe that it is not enough to just become an arhat, which is the ideal for the Theravadins, isn't it? To get to become Theravada. They say, how do they say it? Become a stream enterer, one enter, and never enter, or an arhat as soon as possible, and sort of get out of samsara as soon as you can. That is the ideal, it seems, in Theravada. But the Mahayanians say, no, it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, that means of samsara, and to be able to help others to get out of samsara by themselves, of course, also, but to help them. And to stay in samsara as long as it takes for all beings to get out of samsara, which is, according to Theravadins, an unpracticable supposition, you can say, not very practical. It will never happen that all peoples will become enlightened. At least I have not got that kind of optimism, let's put it that way. But anyway, so we have these countries like Tibet and also in Nepal, the majority of the Buddhists there are Vajrayana Buddhists under the influence of Tibet. But I happened to meet a Dutch lady professor in 1977, just before I got my higher ordination. And that lady had been at my ordination here in Sri Lanka when W.S. What's his name, who became the ambassador in the United States, W.S. Karunaraphan. So W.S. Karunaraphan, he was at my ordination. And the Dutch lady, professor of Buddhism and Hinduism and Pali and Sanskrit, she happened to come to Nepal to study how many Theravada Buddhists there are. Not the Mahayana, but the Theravadas. And at that time, there were actually only 55 monks and 60 nuns. And that was it for Theravada. But later on, it started growing and growing and growing. Now there are quite a few hundreds of Theravada Buddhist monks and nuns in Nepal, next to the Vajrayana Bhikkhu Bhikkhunis. So that's a special case because it used to be a Hindu country and Buddhism was not really welcome there. If you want to become a Buddhist monk in Nepal, you have to go to India to get ordained. Would not happen in Nepal those days. Later on, now it is possible. So anyway, the spread of Buddhism to places like beyond, on the eastern side, like Korea and Japan, also very strong Buddhist countries. Well, with Korea, we should say, it used to be a very strong Buddhist country, but because of Christian proselytism, trying to and doing change people's religion, now the majority of the Koreans are Christians and not anymore Buddhists. They used to be. But in Japan, you could say, yes, the majority, 80%, is still Buddhist. They have what is called also another, type of, what is it called there? Shintoism. All the Japanese are, by birth, Shintoists. It's different from Buddhism. But on top of that, or next to that, they are also Buddhists, and mostly in the Mahayana tradition, and especially in Zen. They put a lot of emphasis on the practice of Zen, of meditation. So when we hear the term Zen, It's, well, very often associated with Japan. But in China also you get Chan. All these words actually come from jhana in Sanskrit and Pali. From jhana it became Chan, and it became sun in Korean, and Zen in Japanese. And it all means actually kind of concentration of the mind and meditation, and derived from Buddhist meditation. So let's see if we have forgotten anything. Well, the spread of Buddhism nowadays is gigantic in the sense that Western countries like the United States, but also Australia, and even in European countries like England, France, Germany, even in Holland also, Buddhism has been spreading like anything. Well, like anything means, if you look at the percentage, maybe there's just a few percentages of the total population, but in absolute terms, it has grown quite a lot. In Australia, when I went there the first time in 1988, the Time magazine in Australia said Buddhism is the fastest growing religion in Australia, which means quite a lot. And in Europe also, I'll just give an example. When we had a meeting with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1993, the first Western Buddhist teachers conference with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala, North India. There were famous teachers like Joseph Goldstein and Jack Cornfield. They were also there. And they said, Your Holiness, this is a book with Buddhist addresses in North America, and there are 600 Buddhist centers in North America, according to this book. But this is the first, what you call, edition, and another edition is now being printed, and that will have 1,000 addresses. So it jumped from 600 to 1,000 Buddhist centers in North America. I don't know whether that includes Canada or not, but anyway, it just showed the trend was it increases in number. So that doesn't mean that everybody is what you call really practicing Buddhism the same way that we do. They have different kinds of practices, but it all is coming from the Buddha's teachings. But for instance, when we hear the teachings of the Dalai Lama, he says, we are coming from Nalanda University. The teachers of Nalanda University, they were teaching Buddhism, but in a more different way of the Mahayana tradition. And so when they quote those teachers, it sounds like something is missing, although they have the same Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, the three characteristics, the Paticca Samutpada, they all have that. When His Holiness says Paticca Samutpada, he sort of, he says it like, it's like whispering and the mouth is not much open. I was wondering why is that? Like an Italian opera singer would say, Paticca Samutpada, something like that, but no. So I figured it must be because it is so cold in Tibet or in the Himalayas that you can't open your mouth very much. But anyway, that is just a joke to keep you a little bit awake. So, why shall we say, is it a way of life? Well, by practicing the Panchasila, the Atasil, the Dasasil, and practicing for instance, the paramitas, also very important, paramitas. In Theravada, we have the Dasa Paramita, In Mahayana, they have the 6 paramitas, but they sort of overlap. It's like when we have the Atat seal and the Dasa seal, there's actually one that is overlapping. So it is actually 9. But anyway, the practicing of those sealers and also the practicing of the paramitas, I would say, and also dana, sila, bhavana, sila, samadhi, prajna. All those are what is called practice of Buddha's teachings in one's daily life. It's not something that you do only when you go to church once a week, or where you have the fear of going to hell if you don't go to church. That is something which is not there in Buddhism. And for instance, when you're observing the sila, you don't say, thou shalt not do this, that, no? It's not like a big finger from the sky telling you what not to do, but it says, I try to observe, to abstain from this, that. So the 5 precepts, or the 8 precepts, or the 10 precepts. So it is you yourself who is trying to abstain from those things, not God from the sky telling you what you should not do. So in that sense, it is also a kind of do-it-yourself religion. The other thing is that when one has what is called karma, the karma from the previous lives. Another thing that we have is life after life after life. We have karma, which is accumulating, and what we receive in this lifetime is probably the result of previous karma. But we don't know even what we have eaten for breakfast on the 14th of April 2015. Do you know what you had for breakfast? I'll tell you. It was kiribap. It was 14th of April, therefore I know that. Otherwise, we don't remember such things. So let alone that we remember things about our previous life. That is very difficult, impossible. It is what is called an achinteya, an unthinkable. Karma is so what you call complicated, so complex that we cannot really understand it with our limited and so-called logical or illogical minds. Therefore, but we can maybe accept that there is such a thing as cause and effect in the sphere of, the ethical cause and effect, and that every action has a reaction and a result, and that all these results again become causes for the next, and so on. So we are accumulating karma and we are receiving the results, the vipaka, therefore. So now maybe I could try to, I think I already mentioned it, the ideal of what is called Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva ideal, I think in your talk already you have mentioned about it, but the Bodhisattva ideal is very common in Mahayana Buddhism. But even in Sri Lanka, which is supposed to be the cradle of Theravada Buddhism, the most learned and most advanced monk, I would say, Venerable Balangura Ananda Maitriya, has announced in public that he prefers to follow the Bodhisattva path, and he would like to be reborn as soon as possible and to continue what he has been doing so far. He said that, I think, on his 100th birthday. So That is one thing, so it is possible. But what about if you become an arahat and you're supposed to have no reason to be reborn, and you say, no, I think I want to be a bodhisattva after all, but then it says, no, 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 you've already become an arahat, so you cannot. I don't know whether you can change that fate or whatever, that destiny or whatever, or whether it's possible to change your mind, saying that, yes, you have thought about it and you still, not because you like what is called samsara so much. Samsara always implies suffering. Not that you really like samsara so much, but because you want to have a chance to help others to attain those stages which you have already attained. And that is more or less the Bodhisattva vow. It's not just simply, thinking about it, let me do this, and then it's done. But it is quite a process in the mind, basically. And in some countries, like in Taiwan, I've been to a huge monastery where there are 1,000 monks and nuns. Actually, 600 nuns, 400 monks, and the head monk there, he used to conduct, and also his pupils, what is called Bodhisattva vow ceremonies. And sometimes there would be 10,000 people coming to the monastery, a huge monastery, 80 acres on the one side, 80 acres on the other side. Anyway, and they would take the Bodhisattva vow. But whether everybody really meant it or knows what they are doing, that is another question. But it was so important that it had been organized, and so many people at the same time took that vow. When the monks and nuns take it, they actually, in the Chinese and in the Vietnamese tradition, they burn incense on the top of their head. 3 sticks of, or like cones of what is called, incense, and then 3 here, then another 3, and then another 3, sometimes even another 3, 12. Very painful. While they take this, what you call Bodhisattva vow, they will think in themselves that this little suffering here is nothing compared to the suffering in samsara. Let me take this vow for the good of others. Like that. They're quite serious about it. Then something else about movements of Buddhism in the world. For instance, WBF, the World Buddhist Fellowship, which was actually started in Sri Lanka in 1956. I think it was, who was it? The famous Malalasekar, yes. Malalasekar, plus, there were several others. Maybe Dr. Ananda was also there. Yeah. So this is an organization which is for lay people, basically. There are also, like other one which I recently attended in Taiwan, is the World Buddhist Sangha Council. That is only for Sangha. This one is mostly lay people. Not that the monks are not allowed to attend, but mostly it is for lay people, fellowship. So the World Buddhist Fellowship, it started in Colombo, and it took place once or twice here, and then it moved to Bangkok. Now the headquarters are in Bangkok since quite a few years and have regular meetings. Then there is also the World Buddhist Sangha Council, which I just mentioned. That was also started in Sri Lanka, but it also moved, to Taiwan, Taipei, and it's still headquarters in Taipei. So they have every 2 years a meeting of monks and nuns of the different traditions, Theravada and Mahayana, mostly actually the Chinese Mahayana tradition. One monk from Mongolia, good friend of mine, who studied here in Sri Lanka in the 1970s. He always comes, but no real Tibetans as far as I see. No, but it is anyway a good, well, it is an effort to bring the different traditions of Northern and Southern Buddhism, or Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism, together. So then they have a thing called the EBU, the European Buddhist Union. That is something quite relatively new. And that is, well, in 1988, Dr. Ananda Gurudoi helped us to get the UNESCO buildings in Paris to have this meeting, 3 days, using all these big halls for it's a European gathering of different Buddhist organizations. Every country in Europe now has what is called a Buddhist Union. So the Buddhist Union of Holland, the Buddhist Union of Belgium, Buddhist Union of Germany, France, England, and all that. They sent representatives to that meeting. That was the first time in 1988. I also attended, and that it took place at such a scale. Then what I just mentioned briefly, but maybe you don't know that, where those 10,000 people did the vow for Bodhisattva, is called BLIA, Buddha's Light International Association. And in Chinese, it's called Fo Guang Shan. Fo means Buddha, Guang means light, Shan is mountain. So Buddha's Light Mountain. And that is also quite a big organization, maybe the biggest Buddhist organization in the world. The master just passed away, Master Xingyun. He died about 2 months ago. When I was in Taiwan, I paid respect to, and they have so many branches, 150 temples in Taiwan and 150 temples around the world. If you want to see a beautiful example, in Wollongong in Australia, but also in Brisbane and in Los Angeles, they have, even in London, they have near Oxford, kind of a temple, nunnery. So they have many, 150 outside of Taiwan, 150 inside Taiwan. But that is strictly Mahayana and strictly Mahayana and Chinese. For me, it became, although I was the chairman of the non-Chinese speaking organization of that organization for some time, and they really wanted me, you know. In the end, I found it was too Chinese for my taste, so I left that organization. But they have a very good other organization called Tzu Chi. If you know that in the after the what is it called, the 2004, the tsunami, they got a lot of aid from a Taiwanese Buddhist organization called Tzu Chi, run by a nun, Buddhist nun, Chun Yan, Chun is her name, and they are very, very good. They have a lot of money because of she's so clever, and they have built a hospital, then they built a, what is it called, a medical faculty, now it's a university, and they go in the world whenever there's a disaster, whether it's drought or floods or natural disaster, they send their people always ready to go here and there. Very fantastic. So then we've already mentioned the Dalai Lama. Unfortunately, we have to mention it nowadays also. But anyway, the Dalai Lama is, I think, the #1 exponent of Buddhism in the world. The most responsible for the spread of Buddhism in the world, partly thanks to the Chinese that Dalai Lama had to flee, and the Tibetans have therefore also gone all over the world, started their centers, and got a lot of sympathy from Western people for the Tibetans. So then Tibetan Buddhism actually spread like anything. Then there was the Vietnamese monk called Thich Nhat Hanh, also world famous, not as famous as the Dalai Lama. And he was living mostly in France from before the war in Vietnam. And he died recently, so Nalima Kentiruan Saranai, all the best. Now, I'm almost coming to an end. A little bit smaller scale, but also important in the German realm. That is Ayya Khema, Sister Khema. She came to Sri Lanka in 1979. And she met me also when I was up in the mountains near Gampala. She was not yet ordained. She said she's going to get ordained by Venerable Narada. And soon she got ordained. Then for 10 years she lived in Sri Lanka, built up her center actually on the Parapudu Island, in the island hermitage, second island, and then left in '89 because of the JVP troubles basically. And then she started some 3 beautiful centers in Germany, even 4 or 5, but 3 beautiful places. And I used to go there yearly. I used to teach also in Germany. And then the other thing, last but not least, is the Ajahns. Now, Ajahn Brahm is coming. Everybody is getting that Ajahn fever, a sort of thing, and wanting tickets or whatever for it, you know. But Ajahn, you know what Ajahn actually means? It is the mispronunciation by the Thai people of Acharya. It is Acharya, not Acharu, but Acharya. And so it became Ajahn. So it was Ajahn, Cha, who was the teacher, and his famous pupil, Ajahn Sumedho, who worked for the American Peace Corps in Thailand, got involved in Buddhism, became a pupil, then became a teacher. He went to England at the invitation of the Buddhist Association of Great Britain, and it started spreading there. Now they've got Amaravati and other kind of centers, and they have centers around the world, also in California, in Italy, and in Australia, near Perth, and also near so many places. So that is also a spreading of Buddhism in the Theravada, what they call the Thai forest tradition. So if that is your cup of tea, then you should go to one of these centers. Now that is my talk. And I mentioned that there's a possibility to ask some questions. Is that